It is almost strange that a giraffe is a real animal with its very unique set of features. These wonky long legs paired with a very unique elongated neck and a very strange fur coat makes this animal a great drawing exercise, not only to kind of enhance our drawing skills, but also to understand a very specific kind of color palette, providing us with a unique opportunity for color exploration and therefore how to kind of really represent these qualities as best we can within a giraffe drawing. So with that being said, hey guys, my name is Matt. Welcome to another video by artincontext.org where we explore various art related topics, and in today's tutorial we will be learning how to draw this very fascinating and unique animal. Now this particular tutorial is done on a digital device, however all drawing processes can be transferred to traditional tools and medium. Now the way in which we're going to start this particular drawing is we're going to start by just sketching the giraffe. So we want to start by establishing a simple giraffe sketch where we establish the giraffe's main features. We can start with the head of the giraffe, working on the general shape in the head, and this is where we kind of want to work our way from the head all the way down to the hooves of the giraffe. So we want to keep the sketch quite light at this point, just working out the general features. And this is where we can also start to think about the pose and how we would like the position of the giraffe to be drawn, or from what angle. Now you can look at a bunch of reference images to assist you in your drawing process, but now as we continue with the sketch, this is where we can already start to think about that pose, and then we'll find that as we kind of work our way through the neck of the giraffe, we'll see that it is quite long, so it is quite an elongated feature, perhaps 3 heads in length compared to that of the head of the giraffe. So we want to make sure that it is kind of connected to this larger body as well, which does become wider as it has this kind of cone shape. So we'll find that that neck does have a cone shape and then naturally is larger at the base where it will connect to the chest area of the giraffe. Now as we establish the body of the giraffe, we will see that the shape is quite round and circular, almost as if it is like a barrel, whereas the legs are very narrow. Now as we work through the legs do become enlarged near the knees, so the giraffe does have these very like knobby knees, these very protruding knees, but as we work our way down the leg after the knees or below the knees, we'll find that the leg becomes slightly narrow again until it protrudes near the hoof joint again. Now we'll find that the giraffe does share a very similar physiology to that of other animals, similar to that of a horse or zebras, where the legs tend to be quite narrow, but then they will protrude near the joint areas, near the knees or the hooves, and naturally that tends to be quite larger than the actual bone structure that connects to those joints. Now as we continue with this process, we're going to then start to refine the giraffe sketch. So once we have established the basic shape of the main features, we can now start to refine them with detailed line work, and this is where we can establish a little bit more unique qualities in a little bit more of a clearer way, such as the eyes, the ossicones, ears, and so on. Now we do want to make sure we spend our time on main aspects of the giraffe, so starting with the head, spending our time on just kind of working through the head, making sure we capture the various aspects of the face. We can also start to work some outlines into the neck, capturing the cone-like shape, and as we work our way through the body of the giraffe, we can start to outline the front legs as well and how they seamlessly integrate into the rounded body. Now we can also add some more shape to the hind legs and how they flow into the back of the giraffe, but we do want to make sure we are taking our time with how we shape the legs and how they are in scale and proportion to the rest of the body. You do want to make sure that the giraffe does have a accurate sense of proportion, so this is why we want to take our time with just refining the sketch, making sure that the features within the face are placed correctly and in place in relation to one another, and then naturally how that flows into the neck, which becomes more wide near the base as it connects to the body, capturing that rounded quality in the body, the barrel-like shape, and then slowly kind of creating the kind of accurate scale in the legs and how they kind of flow into the body and therefore flow outward from the body into these more narrow structures that eventually connect to the hooves. Now take your time with kind of lightly sketching the giraffe, refining the sketch. Again, look at some reference images on the internet to assist you in your proportional placement of these various features, and once we have done that, we can then start adding in some base layers of color. Now once we have established the giraffe with a light sketch, the intention is to start working in some base colors into the giraffe. So giraffes have various hues that shift between hues of brown and oranges, and the intention should be to start with lighter tones of brown and then slowly work our way with a layering process to darker tones, slowly building up darker tonal values. At this stage, we want to start considering the direction from which the light source is coming and how this will inevitably cause shadow formations around the giraffe, but we also want to represent these shadows with darker hues of brown to maintain the right coloration within the giraffe. So we're not just representing shadows with a black medium or just a darker medium, but the intention is to kind of keep working with the same kind of color spectrum, where we start to see how shadowed areas of that color is just that color in a darker hue, and that's how we represent shadows more accurately without necessarily deviating from the spectrum of color that we are working within. At this stage, we want to consider the direction from which the light source is coming, so that's really important. And as we work through these base layers of color, we can start to work in the patterns of the giraffe as well. Now, the patterns can be described as these kind of square-like tiles that become smaller the more narrow or the smaller the body part is. So naturally, those patterns will become smaller as we shift into the legs and the top section of the neck, as well as around the features within the face. Now, this means that the pattern shapes will naturally become smaller, so you do want to bear that in mind. We also want to make sure that the patterns flow around each body part in a three-dimensional way. Now, this is where we think about how the patterns naturally kind of curve along various surface areas within the body, and that's something we do want to bear in mind in the back of our head. But as we continue, we also want to think about building up tonal values from light colors to darker colors, with the intention of kind of keeping that consistency of color variation within the patterns as well. So the idea is that we will kind of think about the patterns being on the surface area of the fur. And naturally, if a shadow is cast on that entire surface area, that means the patterns will be darker as well. But otherwise, we can then move on to kind of adding darker colors to the giraffe drawing. So we also want to be thinking about the pose and the stature of the giraffe drawing and how it would be positioned towards the light source. This will inevitably have an effect on the shadowing and along what side of the giraffe that shadowing forms. Now, you do want to take your time working in some shadowed marks with some darker brown colors, and this way you maintain the correct color palette as you do so. By the integration of shadows, we will also start to see how it emphasizes the three-dimensional nature of various features in the giraffe sketch, and we also want to think about the anatomy and how different aspects of the giraffe have different shapes. For instance, the chest will have these wrinkled qualities just due to the way the neck connects to the chest, and naturally that causes a little bit of kind of loose skin and overlapping qualities within the skin. So we do want to think about how these various features do cause these moments of wrinkles on the surface area of the skin, and naturally will cause some shadowing. But as we move on, we're going to move on to kind of adding color to the giraffe pattern. So this is where we can start to actually integrate some reds and browns, more of these kind of rustic qualities to the actual patterns in the giraffe. The intention is to work with warm reds and browns, also keeping in mind which sides of the giraffe are slightly lighter or darker. A good suggestion is to use lighter colors once again near the areas of the giraffe that are illuminated. However, you can use darker colors in areas where there are more shadows present. Now, you also want to make sure that there is this kind of moment where as you add color to these patterns, you keep the legs fairly light in tonal value compared to the rest of the body. The legs of a giraffe tend to be quite light in color compared to that of the rest of the giraffe, so that's just something to bear in mind. But otherwise, take your time slowly building up the colors within the various patterns that are present within the actual giraffe. We also want to make sure we keep the patterns smaller in scale once again as we shift towards the thinner and smaller features of the giraffe, such as the narrow legs or the upper section of the neck. But another thing to remember is to keep in mind that the patterns will become darker near the shaded areas, so we want to make sure we take our time with filling in the patterns, making sure we use the right color palettes between having these lighter and darker moments to represent illuminated areas and shadowed areas on the surface area of our giraffe. Now, we want to work in some shadows over the pattern. By doing this, we cover the body with a shadow formation in a way that seems more realistic. Once again, a shadow covers the entire surface area of the body, and that includes the patterned surfaces as well as the unpatterned surfaces. So this is where we want to think about the creases and the wrinkles in the skin and how they form along the body of the giraffe. We can represent these features by integrating darker colors of brown, and this is where we basically don't necessarily just use a black medium, but we use darker browns to represent the darker shadows to keep consistency within the color spectrum. Now, continue with this process of working with patterns and shadow formations, again making sure to keep the legs lighter in coloration, both for the areas that have pattern on it, both for the patterned areas as well as just the actual surrounding fur that doesn't necessarily have a pattern. So the legs are just generally lighter, but we can then move on to adding some color and details to the head of the giraffe. So we now want to just shift our attention to the giraffe head, where we follow the same process of building up colors in the giraffe face using reds, oranges, brown hues, but this time we do just want to take our time with the head. So we can also kind of darken the eye as well, making it black with hints of brown to emphasize the curvature in the eyeball. We can also add add a highlight to the giraffe eye to emphasize the glassy surface of the eye. The giraffe eye tends to be really dark, almost having a black coloration with little hints of brown and a very stark highlight to represent that quality of a glassy surface area that light reflects off of. We also want to make sure we maintain the orange-red hues, once again maintaining a color consistency within the spectrum of those oranges and browns, and we can also keep the colors light around the giraffe's eyes. The giraffe head patterns also once again tend to be smaller, and we also want to think about once again how they form along these three-dimensional surface areas, so naturally how they will curve around the face and so on. You do just want to make sure you take your time building up those colors with layers, making sure to work in some darker details to emphasize the nose, the eyes and the ears. We also want to make sure we use colors to strategically represent both the illuminated and highlighted areas in the giraffe, but otherwise we can then move on to our last aspect of our giraffe drawing, and this is where we add highlights and shadows to the giraffe. Now this is where we can now work in some lighter tones around the patterns to represent the lighter qualities of fur in the giraffe drawing. When drawing giraffes, a good idea is to kind of work in these lighter qualities towards the end. This is kind of just a good way to control moving around those darker patterns. So you do want to take your time carefully working around the pattern, ensuring that you maintain the right color values within the patterns of the giraffe. We also want to make sure we work in these lighter colors around the pattern throughout the entire giraffe drawing. As we do this, we will see how it starts to resemble just a more realistic color variation and pattern and tonal quality in our giraffe drawing. And then lastly, we want to go over the shadow formations one last time within the entire giraffe drawing, where once we have kind of worked around those patterns with a lighter hue, we can then add those shadows at the end to really cover the entire surface area of the giraffe. But once again, the shadows will cover both the patterned areas on the surface area of the fur as well as the unpatterned areas, and that's where we want to basically integrate these shadows as a last step and kind of quality on our giraffe drawing to have this consistency within shadow formation and not necessarily just over the patterns or the unpatterned areas, but over the entire surface area. And then lastly, just make sure you go over your entire sketch one last time, making sure you really emphasize the outline of various features, making sure you have kind of attended to all aspects of your giraffe drawing. But otherwise guys, there you have it, an easy giraffe drawing done with a few simple steps. If you did like this video, please do let us know in the comment section below. If you are interested in similar or related topics, we'd love to hear back from you guys. Please do just let us know what you're interested in, whether it is animals, insects, nature, or just anything else really. And you can show your support by liking and subscribing. This helps us to grow the channel, which enables us to make more art related content for you guys, which we love to do. So please do show your support by liking and subscribing. But otherwise guys, that is it from me today. Until next time, see you in the next video. Cheers.